to the Common Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 21.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. Today, I'm talking to Ramon Villalobos. Ramon is a fantastic artist who has worked for DC, Marvel. He's done a lot of fantastic work throughout his entirety of his career. I've known Ramon for probably 5 or 6 years. One of the few people I've had the great opportunity to actually sit down and have a meal with. And he's just one of those guys who's just so passionate about everything he does. It's really infectious. He's also incredibly funny, incredibly charming, on top of the immense talent he has with his art. And I'm really glad he agreed to come on the show and talk. And I was also excited because throughout these past 20 some odd episodes, we haven't really talked a lot about nu metal. And while it has its detractors, I really it was one of the prime versions of metal that was big when I was coming up, and I have a certain affinity for it, and it was really great to share that with Ramon. Ramon and I talk about a bunch of great things, and again, it's just a blast talking to him. I also want to say real quick, I highly recommend you go search out the Gutter Boys podcast, and with JB Rowe and Cam Del Rosario, and they have a really 2-part episode with Ramon that's like a real deep dive into Ramon's beginnings as an artist and all that. So we don't really go into that here. We touch on a few things here and there, but Ramon's such an interesting guy. I would be remiss in not telling you to go check that podcast out, those 2 episodes, and kind of get like the history of Ramon. So let's get to him. Ramon Villalobos. Let's go. All right, Ramon. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I'm really excited to talk to you because you are the first guest I'm going to have on here who has an appreciation, nay, a passion for something that I also have a passion for, and that is nu metal.
Sure.
And it can be a derisive time in metal, but it's also birthed many a great bands, many a great songs. And I know you are a huge fan of the Deftones.
Right.
So much so that I've been inspired to go and actually start filling in some gaps because...
Well, you said you never listened to them at all, right?
Not actively. Like, I've never put on an album and checked them out. I've heard Change. I've heard some of the bigger songs. But it definitely inspired me to go back and start listening to. So I'm starting to do a deep dive into that.
Where are you at right now?
Well, I don't remember the name of the album. I'm about a week away since I had to start re-listening to, because I'm doing a blind spot episode of Black Sabbath with Dio, and I had done that, started that a couple months ago, but it's been a while. But since I've listened to it again, and I'm getting ready to record the episode, so I wanted to refresh that in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I made it through the 4th album.
Okay.
I want to say the name is escaping me.
This is self-titled. It's just the one with the skull and the flowers.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's just the self-titled 2003.
So, and you've kind of said this on Twitter, like Deftones are like a vibe.
Yeah, I think what I love about Deftones is they're so a lot of metal, get you hyped up, but only Deftones I feel like you could listen to when you're in a chill mood. You know what I mean?
No, totally.
Yeah, you don't have to it doesn't make you. It's not angry music. It's just it could be real creepy or sinister or whatever sometimes, but it just sounds good, and it's not it's not it's not like music to thrash to or anything like that. It's just relaxing.
No, totally. And once you said that kind of made it click for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily listen to metal just purely for aggression or anything like that, but just hearing that terminology being used, like it's a vibe. I'm like, oh, okay. And no, it really like put my mental space into a place where I'm like, okay, I can appreciate this as that.
Yeah, when I was younger, I didn't like it though, because when I was younger, the metal I wanted was just like, angry, just like pissed off music, right? I wanted to be fast. I wanted to be loud as shit. And Deftones, I always thought they just sang real slow, and they were like, it was less about,
Yeah, I think I saw them in concert. I don't know if my memory's playing tricks with me, because, God forbid, it's been I think 17 years now since this concert I'm talking about. But there's the Summer Sanitarium with Metallica.
They weren't on it.
They weren't?
Mm-mm.
I thought they were on it for a few dates. I could be.
Maybe. I know, like, because that came out here, and I was going to go to that, and they were definitely not there for that.
No, they were. I think Mudvayne was on those dates. I am not 100% sure on the West Coast, but I distinctly remember them, Linkin Park, and then Limp Bizkit came out, and we booed and threw shit at him, at Fred Durst, until he went off stage. Well, he came into Chicago all hot because he was beefing with like one of the shock jocks in Chicago, and he actually like put on the big screens. The shock jock thing was Mancow. He's like, I think the Mancow can suck a dick or something like that, and so everyone just started throwing shit at him, and it was pretty funny though, because he was.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Because it was pretty funny, because he was just kind of being a dick, and he rolled into Chicago, and a lot of the meathead community supported that shock jock, and that's who was there for that. But I could have sworn I saw them there. I don't know if they were on an Ozfest.
Yeah, sorry, they were in 2003.
Yeah.
So I was going to go in 2000, and yeah, like you were saying, Limp Bizkit, Mudvayne, Deftones, like that's not right at all. That's not who was on it. In 2000, that wasn't it. But that was the 2003 lineup.
Yeah.
In 2000, it was Korn, Kid Rock, Power Man 5000, System of a Down. So what an upgrade in those 3 years. Except for Korn and System of a Down, which they're both sick. But Power Man 5000 and Kid Rock, like, kind of trash.
I have to disagree a little bit there about Power Man. Kid Rock, total trash. But Power Man 5000, that first album, that was great. The rest, not so much. But
wait, if those four though against each other, you have to go 2000.
Pound for pound, it's no contest. But yeah, I just distinctly remember just seeing like Chino just all sweaty and just kind of like doing his classic, like, just like screaming, but just the music just being this slow, and that just was not the right crowd for that, especially at that time, because people.
2003, that was like the opposite of where that music was going for, like, right at that moment, I think.
Yeah. And then Linkin Park came on after them, and they actually won over a lot of people, because a lot of people were like, I just in the crowd, you just heard a lot of complaining, but like by the end, because Chester was screaming his ass off, and when a lot of those riffs and stuff they have, they really just are really bass heavy and just kind of pound at you. So in a concert environment, it's like, okay, you can start grooving with that, even if you're like not a huge fan of the rap sections and stuff like that. But I liked
when Linkin Park first came out. I liked them a little bit. Like, I liked when that first song, like, One Step Closer, I thought that was kind of sick. And then, like, I remember me and my friends listening to it in like the 7th or 8th grade and thinking, like, I don't know, man, they're using a lot of big words. This is kind of corny, kind of like nerd shit. It was like, it felt like I didn't know what like a weeb was. I didn't know what like that kind of I didn't know what that was, but that's what it was, and I was repulsed by it. And I remember at Christmas, my Nina, she got me like my godmother, she got me a Linkin Park shirt, and I was like, oh, thank you so much. And I look at my mom like, Mom, like, I cannot wear this thing. Like, people are gonna think I'm fucking lame. And so she's like, that's fine, it's fine. Well, and like, as you sure, like, yeah, we'll just take it back. Like, I was like not sure if that would be like offensive, right? Like,
yeah.
Mom's like, she won't care. She doesn't give a shit. So she like, it's like, hey, he got the wrong size. So like, I remember she took me to take it back, and I got a fucking Slipknot shirt, and nice. I still have that shirt. It's like, It was my first. I think it was my first Slipknot shirt because I remember like just going, like, hey, I cannot wear Linkin Park. Everybody was like, I'm a fucking loser.
Well, having gone back and listened to that first album,
Which one?
The Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, that's a really solid album. That's like just if
Sorry,
I'd say give it a shot. I don't know if you've gone back and listened to it lately.
Like some friends, they put together this like full month where they were listening to a different new metal album.
Okay.
For like 15 days, and they switched to like garage rock music after that for like the next 15. But like for the first like 2 weeks, I listened to all of them, and that was one of them for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I was like, it's fine. It's just like at that time, I thought it was corny. I still think like some of those songs are awesome. Like removed from everything, I think they're pretty good. But at the time, I was like, it's just corny. It's just for like for crybabies.
Well, I had kind of the same feeling about Slipknot because just them being kind of corny.
Oh my gosh.
All right, well, let me set the stage. Let me set the stage because you're quite a few years. Well, not quite. You're younger than I am, but
how old are you?
I'm 38. So
yeah.
So Slipknot was hitting in 99, 2000 really big. That was like their time, and that's like just when I'm graduating high school. So my experience of like seeing Slipknot is just through all the freshman and sophomore angry, like not necessarily the jocks or like nerds, but like just the angry, angsty freshmen and sophomores. Just
that was me.
But that was just my experience with them.
I had on the Slipknot shirt. It was incredible.
And I never gave them a fair shake. It wasn't until a few years later where my wife was actually getting into them. I think their Duality, they're like probably their biggest song.
Because that's funny that you say that, because I was talking to our mutual friend Craig about what their biggest song was, and he said that because I think out there they played that more than anything. Like he said,
yeah, Duality
like it was a big radio
everywhere.
hit, which like not really the case out here. Like, I mean, I don't. To the extent they played any of their songs on the radio, I mean, I guess it might have been that, but it wasn't like, I don't recall it being like that big. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember it being big. I was into it, but I didn't. In my head, that doesn't seem to fit. I still think "Wait and Bleed" is their biggest song, but yeah,
I think it's a better song. I think it's a better song. It was like their first. That's "Wait and Bleed" is kind of what was like their first kind of rock hit.
Yeah.
And especially because Craig's from Chicago, right?
Right. He's from the Illinois area.
Yeah. So in the Midwest, at least, we got Iowa right there. So there's going to be a lot of Midwest pride for Slipknot. And in Chicago at the time, there was the alternative station. There was an alternative station and a hard rock station, and it was kind of a battle of increasing heaviness because more and more heavier things were ending up on the radio because these two stations were just fighting back and forth for listeners. So on this alternative station that was pretty much just like in the 90s, like all grunge and late night industrial and stuff like that, and just a real to put the word on it, alternative station, it became more of like a hard rock metal station, which people hated. But I loved, because at the time I was like, yes, this is all my music. I don't want to hear fucking Pearl Jam again. So yeah, when Duality hit, that was just like everywhere. It was one of those songs where it's like if like sometimes you'd find it playing on both stations at the same time.
That's it. Yeah, no, like out here I don't recall it being like big like that. The one, like, I mean, he made it sound like it was like chop suey big. You know what I mean? Okay. And I just like, it's hard to imagine that, but
I don't know. It might have been. I don't know. That's a good.
I mean, that's cool either way. But that was like the first Slipknot album. I remember listening to it. Like my cousin was giving me. My cousin's like a massive Deftones fan. He loved Deftones. Like they were like friendly with the band because they're from out here, like in Sacramento.
Okay.
And I was like, 6th, 7th grade into Linkin Park, and he would just be like, Linkin Park sucks. Like, get over that. It's lame. Like, Korn was like, Compromise.
Yeah.
But then I remember one day we were going. He gave me a ride to church in his like Camaro, and he's like, "Have you ever heard of Slipknot?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" And he like put it on and
I'm
just
sorry.
like blasted it on the way to church.
That's like the perfect like. My
We
cousin
got
gave me a
there.
ride in his Corvette to church,
Yeah,
and he's like, "Hey,
Camaro.
you ever listen to Slipknot?"
Dude, it was sick. It's my boy Matt. We go to church. It's like a pretty long drive because his mom was going to like a mega church, and I was like, dipping my toe in being like born again Christian type shit,
Mhm.
And then by the end of it, I wasn't. I was like, no disrespect to that, but I just remember being like, felt changed by the time I got there, just like, oh my God, what is this? And I was like, fuck church. Like, let's just go back in the car, let's put that Slipknot.
Oh, the devil got you,
Uh,
Ramon. The devil got you.
I was so into Slipknot, it was crazy. And so, yeah, I got way into them, told all my friends about Slipknot. They all hated them. And then I remember freshman year, like I said, I came to school, had the Slipknot shirt, and like I saw like another Mexican kid in PE class, and he had a Slipknot shirt, and I was like, oh my God, we're
Nice.
best friends now. You know what I mean?
Well, that's how it was,
Yeah.
before social media. It was like who had the shirt of the thing you liked on.
If you had another band shirt similar, then you were we're boys. And yeah, I saw Slipknot. That was my first concert.
Oh
Slipknot,
wow,
System of a Down, and Rammstein. It was the
that's a
Pledge of Allegiance tour. It was like right after 9/11.
that's a
And
that's a fucking ticket right there.
dude, it was crazy. It was like the System of a Down right after Toxicity,
Yeah.
and Slipknot right after Iowa. It was like '01, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I was perfect age for all that shit. And like Deftones, Papa Roach, like they were both local also. And it was funny though because like before that I loved like Metallica, just Metallica and like 80s metal because I didn't have a CD player.
Yeah.
So I had like a cassette player, and my uncle, he would give me like doubles of like all of his tapes from like the 80s. So like
That's a good uncle right there.
so before that I was only listening to like Motley Crue, Iron Maiden, Metallica, and yeah, it was awesome.
Well, I've mentioned this on the podcast before to people, but I kind of believe that most metal heads or people who like metal, you kind of start with one of the big four: Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, or Anthrax, and that's they kind of act as that gateway in some way, and usually that just leads you down the rabbit hole to either more extreme stuff or more crazy stuff or what have you. So, and just hearing that you had because my intro to metal was Metallica as well.
Right.
It was the 90s. I think everyone's intro to metal was probably Metallica, even if it didn't last very long. Slayer wasn't exactly putting out great shit in the 90s, and
I remember me and my boy Carlos, different Mexican, also was in the metal, and we were like hanging out, and we're like, dude, Slayer's got one song, but it fucking rules so hard. I'll listen to every version of it they put out.
What song is that? What's their one song?
All their songs sound the same.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is.
Two songs that are exactly the same, but it rules so hard it does not matter.
Yeah, I had a previous guest on, Brian Latendry. He hosts he's a writer, and he also hosts a heavy metal podcast with Anthony Johnston called Thrash It Out. And they they go through albums and they go deep dives into an album, talk about and track by track and all that. But yeah, he mentioned before, like, Slayer is that band where it's like you're just kind of listening to a song to get to that one riff that they do, and you're like, when's that riff gonna come? And then they do it, and it's like, fuck yeah, all right. I have one Slayer song on like a playlist, and even then it's one I edited. It's just the intro to Hell Awaits, before the verse kicks in, just because it's a badass intro that'll get you pumped up to do anything. But yeah, I totally see the Slayer one song thing, and I think it's really not necessarily a bad thing though, because if you like what you like, you know, there you go. They're never going to surprise you, but they're also never going to disappoint you.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, like, yeah, Metallica I love, but it was funny because, again, like, the age that I was at, like, I didn't come in through, like, you know, good, like, quote-unquote good Metallica. Like, I came in during the Load and Reload era, and I was like, this is the greatest band of all time.
Well, well, I was
like,
Load and Reload. Those were my entry points.
When the Mission Impossible I Disappear song came out, I was like, this song fucking rules. I want to do this.
I remember biking to the Circuit City the day the Mission Impossible soundtrack came out, so I could buy the CD, so I could have that song. Because that was, you know, there's, again, you know, old timers. There's no iTunes, there's no Google Play or Spotify.
Well, there was Napster. That's how I got it, because I remember I'm at home watching MTV. And they're like, Lars Ulrich is suing Napster, and it's him going like, "This is unfair. You should."
But he was right. That's the thing. He was right.
He's totally right. But he's like, "There's this thing called Napster, and all of our fans are just stealing our music. You can go on there and get any song of ours you want for free." And I was like, "What?"
I know the main argument was they're upset because demo versions got leaked. And
I mean, they were 100% right, and I don't think like any of the streaming services are like, you know, equitable to artists or anything.
No.
But the irony of that was like
it caused you to go and download all their shit off of Napster.
Download their shit off of Napster. Although, like, I ended up buying their stuff because I had a slow internet speed, so it didn't really matter. But
well, you know, to relate it to comics. Before I got back into comics, my brother handed me a bunch of DVDs. He's like, hey, because he asked me like, oh, are you interested in any comics? I got some comics. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know I thought he was going to give me books or whatever. So he hands me all these DVDs, and it's like, got like full runs of books and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you can, they're all digital now. Like, oh, that's cool. I didn't realize like, and then, but that did end up me going and buying it. All these hardcovers, all these things. Not that I'm saying pirating is good, not in the slightest.
No, when I got into comics too, I would get them from the library. Like, I so much from the library, and then because of that, I kind of justified like, well, what's the difference, you know? And I would download so much shit, but there's so much stuff that I've bought because I read like, you know, shitty CBR scan files in like, you know, 2008 or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, I need this in person, you know, because there's not really like with music. It's a little different because it doesn't really matter. Like you don't have to hold it in your hand. It's not a tactile thing. Although I've bought a lot of like vinyl records now, so I don't know if that's true. But you know, the same idea works, right? Like I
think the vinyl thing. I think it's also, and I've seen a lot of people talk about like going back to even like tapes and CDs again, just because I think we, as you know, kind of figured out like when you have everything available to you, you still just end up listening to the same things over and over again. Yeah,
and it feels good to support that stuff.
Yeah, and you know there is, you know, to borrow the term, a vibe to just grabbing a specific thing and saying, I'm gonna put this album on. I'm gonna, you know, put this, because you can do that in your music player or whatever, but it's not the same as physically making that decision of putting a vinyl on, putting a CD on, or just recouping some of that like nostalgia. Yeah. You know, Matt Miner, comics writer. He's been talking a lot about like tapes. He's been like collecting tapes again and using Walkmans and stuff like that. And you know, I kind of chuckled to myself about it. I'm like, I get it, because, you know, I have a lot of fond memories of listening to tapes of Load and Reload. I have a lot of non-fond memories listening to that shit in Walkman, so fuck that. But, like, CDs, I understand. Well, you know, CDs at the time, I was into getting CDs. It was at the age of, like, you had to hold that fucker perfectly straight, otherwise I was going to skip. Yeah. It wasn't until a couple of years later where they had the more non-skippable ones. I had so many
janky ass CD players that would like break after like a few months, and it's just like, well, guess I'm back to the Walkman. But yeah,
Well,
I used to also have a good hustle in like 7th, 8th grade where nobody else like on at my school had like a CD burner. Like my
mhm.
stepdad got it 'cause he was always kind of ahead on like technology, like he wanted that kind of shit. And I would go to Best Buy with him, and he had like he liked the same music that I did, so we'd just go. He's like, "Oh, what do you think's good?" And I would just be like, "Get that." You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So like, he had a great CDs collection, and then in turn, I had a great CD collection because I would just burn his, and then
Yeah.
I would go to school like, "Oh, do you want that new Godsmack?" Go home, burn it, and then get, charge $5 for it.
Okay, before we get too far, what's your opinion on Godsmack? Are they even
Fuck
metal?
yeah. All right, well, they're like really hard rock, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, they're not new metal, and it's offensive
No.
when people suggest that.
No, because
Um,
their first big song could be kind of described as new metal-ish, but it's not really.
yeah,
I wouldn't say it catches the same
to
spirit
me,
as like
part of new metal is like incorporating elements of like hip hop and like
yeah.
different things, and Godsmack doesn't really do that.
No.
You know, like the guy would play bongos weirdly in concert, but other than that, like there's not really incorporating anything else into it. And like a big part of new metal to me is like a multiculturalism,
Hmm.
like a multicultural approach to metal, which is like it makes it sound a little bit more like fucking uh like like woke or whatever. You know what I mean? It makes it sound more like that than it maybe is, because so much of it just sounds like so many people consider it like angry white guy music.
Yeah.
But almost all those bands had like people of color in them, and almost all of them had like like deep respect for like hip hop music and that kind of shit, which is why they were rapping in the first
Hmm.
place. And
Yeah.
a lot of yeah, so like I always get annoyed by that when I would see that shit, just because like a lot of people paint it as like new metal is just like Limp Bizkit,
Hmm.
and Limp Bizkit is a new metal band, but it's not like the prominent one to me. Even
No, no, not at all. And
I'd say Korn, but
yeah, I would say if you're gonna say what's a band that truly defines what like new metal is, I would definitely say Korn. That would
yeah,
be my flat out answer.
and
Um,
like Fieldy is a big part of that, and that dude is Mexican as shit.
mhm. Totally. And
Same thing with Deftones, because Deftones
mhm.
is like the other like new metal band, although they fought against that label for a long time, and a couple of those dudes are Mexican, and you know,
And wasn't their original bass player Asian, I believe, as well?
well, yeah, Chi Chang, he was like Filipino or something. He's from
Yeah.
Stockton Zone.
So yeah, and
R.I.P. to Chi.
it's kind of funny because it does kind of mirror like the thrash metal, the dawn of the thrash metal, where you had Metallica and Slayer and Anthrax and Megadeth, and while they all were thrash bands, I wouldn't call them the same band. Just like
No,
Korn is not Slipknot, is not Deftones, is not
two
Limp Bizkit.
two great like thrash and new metal, two great Northern Californian traditions. Not a lot of people want to give them credit for that. You know what I mean?
No, I know it should get a lot more notice that it's birthed what is probably like the main influences for metal now.
Yeah.
Because sure, Pantera came along and really got the groove metal going, but new metal really put a stamp on like, oh, you can have a heavy riff, you can have a drum groove, you can have, it doesn't have to be just straight 1 2 3 4 beats. You can have some swing to it, and you can have some different elements to it. And a lot of metal these days is just about what other elements people are bringing to it. Because you can take a
Yeah.
band like I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're called Amaranth.
Mm-mm.
And
Yeah. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying, but
well,
I want to.
they're a metal band, but they have a female singer, a male singer, and then another male singer who screams. And they have stuff that's like dubstep beats with these super thick, heavy guitars, and almost sometimes the screaming guys, I would consider it rapping, I guess. And then they have these soaring vocals and stuff. And that doesn't exist without like new metal coming along and saying, "Hey, let's do some other shit with this Let's add some samples. Let's add some kind of crazy drum breaks and some, scratches and stuff like that.
So what I was gonna say was, it's interesting because, like, as much as I was into nu metal, like when I got out of nu metal, I got out of it like so fast and so hard, just because it felt like a homogenation of like aesthetics, of like a cultural, like with nu metal, it felt so broad and like sort of inclusive to different kinds of things. And then by the end of it, when like Lamb of God kind of became like the biggest metal band, it felt like it was just like white dudes with long hair. You know what I mean? And I was just like, that's lame. I don't like, and not because of that, like, because I wasn't cognizant of that at like, in high school, but it just felt like all these bands sound exactly the same. They're all dudes that want to shred. And to me, I hated shredding when I was younger. I hated complicated guitar playing, really, of any kind. Because it just felt like when I was in school, and like the kids that could play guitar were like kids who took classes and like did it when they were like 5 years old and were like extreme prodigies of it. So it just felt like loser shit to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you could play guitar really well, then that must mean you're a fucking loser.
Well, there's, whenever like a musical movement comes along, there's always like rapidly diminishing returns. Because, by the time, Korn is big, all of a sudden you got, the guy who's Jonathan Davis's half brother fronting a band, and all of a sudden,
shout out to Edema, they were sick.
And and then,
but Edema, El Nino, there were different bands that had different energies to it. And then when that stuff was like uncool, it was like toxic. You didn't want to make music like that.
Yeah,
Power Down 5000, for as much as I don't really like them or whatever, is similar, and it was in that wave. But when all the bands have logos and have album covers that look like that sort of like, the prototypical metal thing that like took over in like the mid 2000s, it was just like so inaccessible to me. And I was just like, I don't even want to listen to that. You know what I mean? That's actually when I got more into Deftones, and then like really into like just like 80s like music, like The Cure. I got really into The Cure in high school, and Depeche Mode, and like later like New Order and that kind of shit, because it was just like, I just wanted to not listen to that kind of shit. You know what I mean?
I'm sensing a theme here, because if I had to describe, The Cure or Depeche Mode, I would put them in the same category as Deftones, in that they're a vibe.
I think so. Definitely. Yeah, that's what I'm all about.
And I think you were looking for your vibe, because that definitely,
Sam Morrissey, Joy Division, all that stuff. That's what I really like listening to, and like poppy, but yeah, like kind of just like
dark and kind of
yeah.
Not, yeah.
Did you ever get into that stuff or no?
Well, I definitely liked Depeche Mode, because they played them a good bit on the radio, because the alternative station here, growing up, at like after 10 o'clock, they would play all kinds of, not the hits, or more industrial or synthy stuff and stuff like that. So you'd get plenty of like Depeche Mode and stuff like that. The Cure, I did not get into them until actually, when Korn did that Unplugged album.
Yes.
And Robert Smith showed up on that.
Well, it was he showed up on that. Okay, my bad. Go ahead.
Well, I think if I'm remembering it correctly, that's what happened. And then I'm like, oh yeah.
But there was also the MTV Icon series. I don't know if you remember that, when they did that on TV, where they like paid tribute to them, and they had fucking Deftones play "If Only Tonight We Could Sleep," and it's one of the most beautiful things MTV's ever put on TV. It's so fucking sick.
And my favorite band had Avril Lavigne singing "Fuel," so I think your icon memories wins there. Dude, just going back to Metallica, I love Metallica so much, and you know what? It broke my heart, because their guitar stuff on that is so hard to play, and so like when I first got a bass,
I got Under the Strings. I went down to Replay Records. It was like the local, like, record store. I got like a bootleg, like vinyl transfer that you put on like car windows. And I put that under the strings for the bass, Metallica. It was sick. And I had like a Metallica hat on when I went there. And I remember the guy going like, "Oh man, at this rate, you could be the bass player of Metallica in a couple years." And I was like, very funny. It's so good.
No.
And I like learned, like a couple Metallica songs, and my friends, we were like started a band, of course, right?
Yeah, that's what you do.
That's what you did. And so they're like, they got pretty good at playing, and they were like, okay, so yeah, we played, these early Metallica songs, which I loved. I like Kill 'Em All, right? This is, not easy, but you could work it out, shitty versions of it.
Oh yeah, that's totally what I did. Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, yeah, so fuck that. We're going to play all the fucking hardest songs, all the solos. And I was like, I hate this. I hate everything about this. And then so like, not only was I butchering the songs that I love so much,
but they were.
I would go to school, and every motherfucker that was learning how to play guitar, I'd walk down the hallway, and they were butchering the same fucking songs. And it was like, it drove me insane. So I was like, I hate Metallica.
So many out of tune Master of Puppet solos.
Just like me trying to play For Whom the Bell Tolls, desperately try to keep up with like shit when it starts to get hard. But then like after that, I'm like, oh, I'm lost. Like I don't know how this shit works at all. I really feel like at that age, if I would have learned like what punk music was that I like, then I would have continued to play music. But like my only experience of playing music with people was either like playing with my friends who like didn't give a shit and that was fun, or like the band that I was in and all those guys wanted to like get good and like play, like, do band things. And I just had no interest in it because that just was like playing more technical, more complicated music, which I thought fucking sucked. I remember, dude, one time we were like hanging out in like, band practice, and they like, my buddy comes like, "Oh, dude, you gotta listen to this song by this band called Dream Theater."
Oh,
and I was like,
shit.
Okay, put that on. And so he put it on, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Turn that off.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so I left that band. Do
you still have your bass?
I sold it when I got out of high school. I remember thinking like, okay, I'm pretty bad at playing bass, and I'm pretty mediocre at drawing, and I'm gonna go to community college and like figure out what I want to do with my life. I could be mediocre at two things, well, bad at one and mediocre at another, or I could put all my extra energy, like when I'm not working and like going to school, into like just drawing, and that's what I did. I think it worked out because I got pretty good at drawing.
Yeah, I think you might have made the right choice there.
I was terrible at bass. I was awful. I was the worst. And like I've recently, every once in a while, I'll think about like maybe I should like order a bass, like try to get back into it. So I still like when I listen to music, I still think about it from like when I played bass for like 4 years, and I was like, oh, that's a cool bass line,
Yeah.
It's always like that first.
Well,
but then I realized like that's a horrible idea. Like I'm not good at that.
Well, I started off as a bass player. I still consider myself a bass player. And I think you if you can, I think you should, because not only is it a great time to buy cheap instruments because they're just, the quality on them is just like ridiculous now.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I have to imagine that.
But also,
honestly, like listening to Joy Division makes me want to like play bass. Like just listening to Joy Division nonstop lately, I'm just like,
I guarantee you,
sounds so fun.
You could go to YouTube right now and Google.
Oh, I've done it.
And just see how to play these songs.
Yeah. And I just want to play, Love Will Tear Us Apart again for like 5 hours straight. I'm depressed.
Hey, it helps.
No.
But and also for selfish reasons, then I can then recruit you for the massive comic book creator band I'm trying to form, where everyone jams on something.
My boy, I talk a lot of shit about technical guitar playing. Our mutual friend Craig, he's great at playing guitar and drums and stuff. our mutual buddy Daniel Warren Johnson is great at all those things too.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like there are so many people who are legitimately good in that. Why would I do that? That's just silly.
Hey, it doesn't stop me. That's all I gotta say.
But you're also like good at it. Dude, I'm telling you, I was terrible. I was really bad. Yeah. But it was fun though. You know.
No, I didn't know Craig played, so I'll have to bend his ear on that.
He's good at drumming. He's good at. He doesn't play metal though. He's
that
only plays
matter.
like 80s Paul McCartney.
I'm in a quarantine band that's not going to be metal at all with a few people. So, but I do have like this random dream of like just putting together a bunch of demos, sending them to comic book musician people, and just like making this EP of just everyone just kind of playing a part on something and just putting it out for like charity or something. Just.
Oh, so I heard you're gonna do a episode with my friend Sophie. Like she brought, I told her doing this, and she brought up, "Oh, I'm doing that too." Like, oh shit, that's awesome. She was supposed to do a thing with Craig similar. Like he was going to do the drum line for a song that she was doing because she makes a lot of synth music on her computer.
Oh, awesome!
And she kicked him out of their band. She said it was so selfish about it. It's like, no, I think I'm going to do the drums. So like she sent him the song and it was completely finished. And I was like, oh, Craig didn't do it. He's like, no, Craig's out. Oh, okay.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Craig.
Drum programming technology these days, you don't really need the drummers anyway, unless you're playing live.
But he was going to play. He was going to do something sick. I already know. You know, Craig's a great drummer.
Poor Craig. Well, he's
very influenced by Ringo Starr, you know?
He's a great drummer, apparently a good guitar player, and also an amazing artist. So I think he's got enough.
Incredible abs. This man got
abs on abs on abs on abs.
He's single. That's the thing, is ladies need to know that.
he is single and ready to socially distance mingle, because...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But no, Sophie... agreed to be on, and I was totally stoked about that because.
Talk about Craig Cermak, by the way. That's another
Craig
comment.
Cermak. You can find him on Twitter. He's got a
Craig Cermak, Sophie Campbell, Daniel Warren Johnson, all the names that have been dropped so far.
Yeah, and well, I'm assuming my wide listenership of average 22 people will probably be familiar with these names.
I don't know if that's true.
But once this episode drops, who knows how many people will listen? I'll get the Villalobos bump, maybe.
I don't know about that either. I haven't said enough controversial things.
Well, you've mentioned that you were mediocre at drawing, which is not true anymore.
Now I'm fantastic. Let's be real.
You definitely came up with kind of the school of guys I
have a virtuoso type approach now that would disgust me if it was done musically.
Really?
I'm incredible. Yeah.
So see, you're so incredible. You just made me lose my train of thought here.
I consider myself like Metallica S&M version of virtuoso type performances, but still fucking banging. Obviously.
Nice.
This is four-leaf clover every time you see my shit.
Nice. So all right. So I'm gonna sidetrack here. Of the people, the more popular people influenced by Frank Quitely's style. Okay. You, Chris Burnham, Nick Pitara.
There's a lot now. There's a decent amount.
Yeah.
Ian Bertram, though he's a little bit further away.
I think Aaron Cooter was for a while, but I think he's broken away from that quite a bit. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I haven't seen any recent stuff. So
he was for a little bit. You're right. There's a decent amount, but sorry, go ahead.
If you are Metallica S&M,
I don't know who these motherfuckers are. They all do different. We all do different things, but we all take stuff from that kind of like style that we like.
Well, yeah, and I was gonna approach that.
The thing that I like to do is I like to draw good faces, good figures. They don't do that. A lot of the other guys, they like to draw really ugly faces and really stiff stuff, but incredible technical drawing. They know how to use rulers way better than I do. I would give them that every single day of the week.
They got perspective down.
Everything else that you want to draw good, that you look to me. Ideas, cool shit, that's me. That's my shit.
Well, I was going to get to the point where it seems like, you guys who have, you wear that influence on your sleeve, you wear it proudly, but you've all have branched out from there. You've taken
I think
that
so.
and moved on, where I think, Chris Burnham's kind of added some more of his older style back into it. It's more brushy. It's more
Cartoonier, uglier.
yeah. Cartoonier, yes. And Nick, I don't know about Nick because Nick doesn't draw anything anymore. Hello?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had a really weird sound come through. I'll have to cut that out. So, so I don't know what Nick's been up to, but his stuff was also going into the much more cartoony route, but still keeping a cleaner line and all that. And you've kind of developed the style with, I guess, for lack of better, like these tick marks, I guess, on everything. Which, for me who can't resist putting extra bullshit on everything, like I totally am down for that. It's almost like you're like making your own screen tone while you're doing it.
Yeah, that's just expensive.
Yeah, it is. I used screen tone once to test it out, and I'm like, man.
I'd say where I vary from Quietly now is like I am never going to be as technically good as he is. I've just given up the idea of that. So now what I try to do is mix in a lot more like 90s stuff, a lot more aesthetic of like Mark Silvestri.
Yes.
And I like that stuff a lot. And also like a mix in elements of like, like the indie comics that I like Love and Rockets and Optic Nerve and stuff like that too. Like I feel like I do that more than I used to, but yeah, like it's it's a mixture of different things. I don't think any of us like have ever tried to only be Frank Quietly. I think that would be weird, but I think where we've diverged is just like you could now. I think the older all of us get, the more our styles kind of are just more formed by our own individual interests.
Well, I think that was also, I think the difference between like you guys and just people who are just like straight copying a style, that was pretty apparent from the start. Like you were definitely borrowing a lot of the language, but you were also not just straight, copying.
I also came after those dudes by like a decent amount of time. By the way, like Quietly, Burnham and Patera were both around for like a while before I was. So like when I came out, it was just like people assumed I was just copying them. So that's fair. I didn't know who they were, but I get it.
Well, it happens. I mean, there's yeah.
Well, like the main thing too is like I didn't grow up reading comics, so like I said, like most of the comics I got were from the library early on when I was like high school.
Yeah.
So like a lot of all the way up until like I didn't start reading new comics in like 2004, 2005.
Okay.
Like I didn't go to comic shops consistently to get them till then. And that was because like I didn't have money.
Yeah.
So I would just eventually I would go to the library and I would like get stuff and I would get like everything and I would just get so deep into it. And yeah, like I don't have the same sort of like it's not in my DNA as an artist because I just grew up like drawing like Slipknot fan art or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I just like to draw like Mortal Kombat characters. So it's a little bit like a lot of the stuff that I'm informed by now is just like the art stuff that I like to draw and like the stuff that I saw growing up, like Mexican kind of like art stuff and like, like growing up Mexican American, like seeing imagery that you don't see anywhere else. Like that stuff gets me really psyched more than like old comic art doesn't also. Yeah. And I think that's the difference between me and a lot of other comic artists just broadly is that I came into this so late, but I knew how to draw, but I didn't know what comics like were good. I didn't know a lot of like the things that everybody sort of like the touchstones of it. I didn't read 90s comics until like just a few years ago, right? Like I did I was going to do Wildcats, but before that I wanted to do a different 90s comic that I was going to just do on my own. And so I read like Cyber Force, Wildcats, all those like 90s Image comics, and I would get so fucking hyped up on them. But that was like recent, I didn't grow up with that mentality of drawing that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and the Cyberforce was like my jam, and like growing up, it was me and my brother, who's just over a year older than me, and we would go to the shop every Wednesday, and we would have our choices. Like I would buy like all the Top Cow stuff. He'd be buying like all the Wildstorm stuff, and because his jam was Jim Lee and mine was Mark Silvestri, so it was kind of that little I guess division that I kind of like dug myself in like almost against like Jim Lee, even though he's a legend and he's got he's well deserved in his legend status, but for me it's like Mark Silvestri was like that's it, that's the hotness. That and Adam Kubert.
Yeah, that
Adam Kubert and like John Romita Jr. Like if I had to like pool any three people from like their 90s work to like hold up as like the pillar, like that's what I would choose. So it's kind of wild that you'd be seeing that now, like because so much stuff has been influenced and kind of taken away from that.
There's a purity to that stuff that's really sick.
Yeah.
But like Silvestri too, like his there's that era before the 90s stuff where he was like incredibly good, where he was like getting inked by Dan Green on like Wolverine, X-Men stuff. It's incredible. And then there's the after the 90s stuff when he started doing when he did like New X-Men and he did Hunter Killer, he did all that stuff.
When Bat started inking him, I believe.
It was him and
The Darkness.
my boy Joe Weems.
Yeah.
The Darkness. Yeah, but The Darkness was still a little bit of that old stuff because I have a lot of that stuff here too. But when he got a little bit more like clean lined, although not like clean, it's a lot of like scratchy stuff. But I love that shit. It feels a lot of influence by like manga and stuff. So I love that also.
And it's kind of telling that ask the Image founders, like you ask them who's the best artist in their group, and they would say Silvestri.
Yeah.
I was listening to the.
I love him.
Yeah, he's been kind of like the I guess the least controversial one out of all of them too. He's just kind of like I was gonna make my comics and all that. And I remember the first convention I went to was in 2008, and we sat at the Image founders panel because that's when they finally like all got together and they were doing Image United. And Mark Silvestri was sitting out there, and he's had these sunglasses on inside because Wanted just came out, and it was like the #1 movie or whatever, and that was through Top Cow. And I'm like, oh yeah, and I was chuckling to myself. I'm like, oh man, guy thinks he's like Tony Stark now because he had the goatee and all that. And then right then, the announcer comes out and tells us that Michael Turner had died like the night before.
Oh shit!
And I'm like, oh no, this guy's probably upset about losing his friend.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a dick. So, but yeah, it was just kind of wild seeing this guy that, like in person, dude's like mega tall too, which is like seemingly unfair to be like super tall and like one of the best artists ever, but that's all right. I like how you do incorporate a lot of the Mexican imagery and like just like that feel to your work. Because growing up Mexican American myself, I've kind of had a different, I guess, influence of it on myself, because it kind of, I don't know what your family situation was in terms of like celebrating Mexican culture, where my dad's Mexican, straight up from Mexico, and my mom's American, and I kind of feel like my dad left Mexico because he hates Mexicans. Like I feel like Mexicans out in Chicago, there's a lot of them. They're so crazy because they go so hard for that shit. Yeah. Like younger ones, I mean. Yeah. Like, I don't know about the older ones, but like when I was there, everybody from Pilsen was like the most Mexican motherfucker you ever met. Because I think because there's like in the Midwest that they have to like try extra hard, which is sick. I love it. But yeah, when I was there, like, so my family, both my grandpas came over from Mexico. Both my grandmothers were still here, and both my parents, were born here. So I grew up third generation Mexican American. But my grandpa didn't want me to speak Spanish because he didn't want me to have an accent. And my mom also like just didn't care. She just didn't,
and it was mainly my mom raising me.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, my dad split pretty early. But she's by herself. She's like raising like 4 kids, and she's just like, she's not thinking about that kind of stuff.
No.
But like, it's just it's like the oxygen that you breathe, like especially out here, because I grew up in a Mexican part of town. Like, everybody was Mexican, and like when I went to school, they had me in like a Spanish speaking class because they needed to have like X amount of Spanish speakers for that class.
Okay.
And so I would have to go there and then like check in, say my name, and then get removed from class, go to the other class that was for non-Spanish speakers, and then like, so I always felt very like sort of outside,
Mm-hmm.
like outsider in general, because like I did not fit with the Mexican kids. I did not fit in with the other like white kids, black kids, whatever. And so it was like just really strange. And then we moved from that town to the town that I mostly grew up in, and it was very white. It was like a white part of mostly, I don't say mostly white town, but it's just like, So that was like very big culture shock. But all my family was still doing all that Mexican shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But my mom was like young, so she was really just doing like young people shit in the 90s. My mom was like 21 when she had me.
Mm-hmm.
So, fairly young and just kind of like into the popular stuff of that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. My neighborhood growing up was a pretty good melting pot. It wasn't overtly white, overtly Mexican, overtly black, overtly Asian.
Yeah.
There's. I grew up on the north side of Chicago, so there wasn't that heavy of the Mexican influence. And I straight up asked my dad one day, I'm like, how come you never taught us Spanish? He's like, never thought you need it.
Yeah.
And
after, when you get older, they're all like, why don't you know it?
Yeah.
And it's like, that would be helpful for you. And it's like, yeah, well, no shit.
Yeah, and my dad's been in this country for well over 40 years now, and he still has a fucking accent.
My grandpa had an accent, and he didn't like that he had an accent, because he would, he would miss out on opportunities because he spoke heavy Spanish.
Yeah.
And eventually he got a job because he did know English, so he got hired because he was able to talk to the Mexican workers and the white workers. And he's like a sugar factory out here. And he worked that job until he retired.
Yeah.
And like, to him, it did not benefit you to speak Spanish, even though it literally benefited him. But it was a hindrance, because everybody else could, if you didn't speak with a heavy accent, you had more opportunities. So I get where he's coming from. I understand it. And, I'm, fortunate because I grew up pretty smart, and I grew up with a lot of opportunities just in general. Like, my family was just very supportive of the things I wanted to do,
Yeah.
Like, when I wanted to play bass, my grandmother, like, bought me a bass. It was like graduation, Christmas, birthday present. She's like, all 3, this is it. But she loved, my grandparents loved music. And like, they were DJs. Like, my grandmother was a DJ. So she loved the idea of me playing music. My grandpa did too. Oh, but he was really disappointed because I was bass. He was just like, that's like, you're a backup. Like,
you're getting people moving if he's thinking about banda. So it's, yeah.
My grandpa loved like country music.
Okay. Yeah. Even more so. My dad, my parents were always very, very supportive. They bought me my first art desk. Like, one day, I had a neighbor, he lent me like this beat up bass that was electric, but it didn't work, which I wish I kept, because it was a real sweet short scale SG looking bass that really just needed like some new electronics, which would cost me like $20 now. But I didn't know that at the time. So after I'd played that for like a few months, I just straight up asked my dad, like, hey, Guitar Center's having this sale. Like, it was like in June or something. Like, it could be my birthday gift and Christmas gift. And, I was the good son. So, I never got in trouble and all that stuff. So my dad's just like, let me think. And then he went up and talked to my mom, and then he's like, all right, let's go. So we went and I got my first bass.
What was your first bass?
It was a Squier P bass special,
me too.
PJ bass. I still have it.
I have it in pieces.
Yeah.
It broke.
Yeah.
And it broke, and I thought, I'm going to fix this thing.
Oh, yeah.
I never fixed it, and I moved, and I still have like all the pieces for it, but I don't know how to solder, so I'm not going to put that thing together.
Yeah, I had spray painted the body and fucked with this pick guard, and like I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So, but it's one of my projects. Probably next summer, I'm going to sand it all down, put some nice hardware on there and pickups and all that, black it out, make it my
like a $200 Squier bass.
Yeah,
it's the shit.
Like of all my guitars and stuff, none of it's expensive. The most I paid for a guitar was $400, and that's it. Like,
dude, it was such a culture shock. Like I said, I went to high school, and I had met this dude named Kyle, and he was cool. Like he knew how to play Pantera. Like, you know, at what's that graveyard? What's the at the cemetery gates?
Cemetery gates, yeah.
He knew how to play that shit like 100%. I was like, this guy is an incredible guitarist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were cool. We like, you know, he went and saw Papa Roach with me in Modesto. That was my boy. And I remember I went to his place. We were gonna play, and I remember I went over and I went into his room, and he had like Tony Hawk Pro Skater on GameCube, and I was like, whoa, this is weird. I didn't know they made that for GameCube. And then he's like, oh, okay, yeah. We went to his garage, and he had like multiple guitars. And he was like shredding on them, like, yo, this guy's crazy. He knows how to play so fucking good. And that's when I was really impressed by that.
Well,
you know,
it's kind of crazy because the first time I actually saw someone like legit shred on a guitar when I was a teenager, and they were also a teenager, I'm like, wait, we can be that good? Like, it just didn't...
right. It was crazy.
I'm like, because
all me and my friends were like terrible, but we were figuring it out.
Yeah. And
this kid was like there already. And I remember it was his birthday, and he was like, oh, do you want to come with me? I'm going to get a guitar for my birthday with my mom. Like, do you want to go? And I was like, oh, sure. It sounds good. Like, you know? So I went with him, and we went to 2 different guitar stores in this other town, and he's looking at like $600-$700 guitars. And to me, that's like, you spending like $1,000 on this thing, like after tax, you're looking at like, that's a lot of fucking money. That's crazy. Because I'm, playing with this bass that's all fucked, you know?
Actions 5 feet high.
And so I remember he's like looking at these expensive ass guitars. He's not sure which one he wants. And I'm just like, insane. Can't even believe this. And then we go, and I guess he had told his mom that he wanted to go look at like a paintball gun or something. So she stopped to pull over to go to look at this paintball gun. And I remember he starts like saying that he wants to buy like this specific one. He's like, well, I'm going to drop like $700 on this guitar for you. Like maybe for the other thing, like maybe for like a different thing, not your birthday. And he starts like just bitching about how he wanted that fucking paintball gun. And I'm like, this is awkward as shit. And I think his mom realized like, oh, your friend is like broke. What are you doing? You know what I mean? It was like, she was embarrassed about it. He was oblivious. He was just like not understanding why he didn't get that gun. And I remember just thinking like, man, me and this guy are not going to be as close as friends as I thought. I just can't, like, I can never see him the same. He's like, he's spoiled. He's crying about this paintball gun, and his mom's going to buy him like a fucking near $1,000 guitar. Unfathomable to me.
Yeah.
And he's like unfathomable because he has multiple guitars at home.
Yeah. It's,
like, I get it, he's good at guitar, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that mentality, I don't know, like,
yeah,
I have what now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guitars, and then like 4 basses. What's that?
Like I feel like for adults that's a different thing though. If you're an adult, you're buying your shit. You have however many as you want. Like I have a ridiculous amount of like, shoes or whatever. Yeah. But I'm an adult. This is a child.
No, but what I'm saying is like I can remember very distinctly like, most of them I bought when I was younger and I was working a job and all that, and I was a teenager. So it was like, yeah. So I've had a few experiences in my life like you're describing where it's just someone who has so much and it's like complaining about not having that extra bit more. And you're just like,
That trips me out about comic collectors too sometimes, where like I remember going to the shop and like just the energy of some people that go in there for some of the stuff is like you're buying all that shit and like are you enjoying that thing or like you like the consumption of it just would kind of like blow my mind sometimes, like the attitude of some people, but that's a different thing.
Well, it's related in the fact that it's just there's
the band Cake?
The band Cake?
Yeah. They have a song where they say you have like a grand piano, you don't even play piano.
Mm-hmm.
And I that line always sticks with me. It's like, what are people doing with some of the stuff that they have? You know what I mean? Like, I'll talk to people who like want to draw comics, and they have like crazy ass, equipment to like draw shit digitally, and I'm like, for what, motherfucker? Look at that thing, like, like I get it. If you're Patrick Zurcher and your whole job is to trace images like from Poser, like yeah, get a great computer for Poser and the tracing program. If you're, you know what I mean? But you don't really need all that shit. You could just draw it on paper, I don't even have a Photoshop.
Yeah, it's
Wild.
I don't I can definitely say the equipment I have doesn't belie the output that I put out. But also I can say, well, I'm also a dad, and I have other responsibilities that prevent me from.
I think some motherfuckers are crazy about what they use, and it's not what you do; it's how you use it.
No, totally, and
it's like it's one thing if you get it, and you're like, it's like that's why. Like if I were to let's go back a bit. If I were to play bass again, I would not buy a $500 bass. I would buy another shitty Squire.
No, well, here's the thing. I would even tell you to get a Squire. There's cheaper basses out there that are really good quality.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I remember I worked a summer at like a stable, like a lawyer. I used to work for when I was in high school. My dad was the head bouncer at a bar, and it was like a Mexican bar.
Mm-hmm.
It was called like Antonio's. And he would have me come in when I was like 14, 15 to be a dishwasher, and like super illegal, but they pay under the table.
Mm-hmm.
And when that job dried out because they closed the bar because of like there was too many shootings, he was doing work for the lawyer of the bar, different like house job,
mm-hmm.
He had to like install sprinklers, whatever they needed, he would do it. And he had me come in to help him. So I worked all summer to buy like a 5-string ESP LTD bass, and I love that fucker. That's the one that I sold when I quit comics. When I started
mm-hmm.
drawing all the way when I left high school. I was like, okay, like I bought, but I appreciated that thing so much because I worked so fucking hard for that.
Yeah, I think I was probably eyeing up that bass you got, because for the longest I wanted a 5-string, and
this was like it's not ESP. It's
no,
like
the LTD. Yeah, the LTD.
Yeah. I had a 5-string black LTD bass. It was fucking sick.
Nice.
Yeah, that's like I would get that again too. That one was sick.
LTD still makes great stuff, man. Like I can't stress that enough, man. There's no reason to spend a ridiculous amount of money. But like like you were getting to the point though, about having things like excessive things. I think I literally just saw you tweet earlier that people are
I was joking.
But you're using a little tablet in GIMP, and people are like, "Oh, Procreate and this and this and
Procreate, Kyle Webster brush the fuck out of here. Yeah. You don't need that."
So no, you don't. You just got to start, and there's a lot of hang up.
Because I'm the outlaw of comics. That's why I can get away with that stuff. That people say, "Oh, you can't say that." I can say whatever I want.
Though I will say, as someone who has an iPad Pro, who I
hear those things are sick.
That it's a total life changer for me, because I finally got like a studio set up in my house, but with a 4-year-old and almost 1-year-old, I'm not going to be sitting in here working during the day. So,
Yeah.
but when, Sesame Street comes on, I can plop them both down, and then I can get a half hour of drawing in and stuff like that. So having Clip Studio on there, and and the great thing about Clip Studio is I already had it on my computer, and I already had all these brushes that I bought, so I could just import them in to the iPad version, which was
I had that at some point. I have no idea how to get that back, but it doesn't matter.
I mean, the portability of it was just like, because for the longest time I'm like, well, I would love to have a portable device, and I had a Samsung tablet for a while that had a Wacom digitizer. So,
I do have a portable device. It's called fucking Paper.
Well, I wanted something that I could do
legit
easily.
Before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to derail you too much, but before the pandemic, the reason why I don't go full digital or like even half digital is because I like to draw like at Starbucks, or if I like go leave my house, I like to be able to work outside of my house, and I can't do that with a computer. I mean, now theoretically I could with the iPad.
Yeah.
But I could very easily just take paper and like go do that. When I go to cons and stuff, I can go with a backpack full of shit. I have all of the stuff I used to work with at home. I don't even have a drawing like desk or table. I don't have I have a very minimal like I have the same piece of masonite that I when I started drawing comics, I cut one out,
mm-hmm.
and it's the same exact one since like 2014, something like that. Maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. I don't remember. It's a long time, Don. That's my point. Is like, I don't know, but I'm kind of a Luddite, and I'm kind of just like, I kind of give myself rules that I probably don't I don't need to follow.
Well, yeah, and I'm not advocating for either way myself. I'm just, it's come in handy for me, but like in the end, like you're right though, it doesn't, like a sketch pad and a pencil, or it's not going to be. But for me, I'm like, oh, I can digitally ink these pages. I can't bust out my nib, when the kids are around and all that, because it just end up in fucking disaster.
To me, it relates to just like the mentality that I have about a lot of things, which is like not about like no pretension, right? No, no pretension, no, like being able to do things like with your hands, being able to like work for real, and like, like having integrity about it. Not that the other stuff doesn't, but like in my head, these things factor into it when I'm working, right?
Oh, no,
like,
yeah, I totally
so
get
many
that.
things. And like we were just having a conversation because that dude Tristan Jones got swiped by
Greg Land,
and not me and you, but me and other people.
Yeah.
And if you're digital, I'm sure it's extremely easy to see like an airplane or something that you don't want to draw, and just like, oh, let me just trace over that. You know what I mean? And I would never do that because I don't have a light box. I don't have the means to do it. I don't even have printer in my computer, like in my printer, to print it out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's just like, part of that is just the mentality of like, I like to do things in a very simple, old-fashioned way because it feels good.
Well, no, I totally get that.
And I like music that kind of is similar. I don't. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't like the wanky guitar stuff as much as as much as I love Daniel Johnson.
You like a vibe.
I like stuff where it's people with guitars and bass. Like I like Joy Division. It's the same kind of thing.
Well, and the way you make comics is a vibe. It's and a lot of it for people, including music and making things, and it's about finding that one that's for you. And I think a lot of this discussion about tools and equipment and stuff like that is just because we're so scared not to have the same tools as the people we respect and we know produce good things. I really hemmed and hawed before making such an investment into the iPad Pro, because I'm like, I don't consider myself a digital artist. I still have my artboard. I still ink with my nib and all that. But for a lot of projects and stuff like that, I'm like, well, it'd be very helpful to have it digitally, you know?
I like that stuff. I respect that stuff, like people who do stuff like that. But I've gone so far in the other way, Don, that I don't even have more than one size of a tech pen. Like everything I do was a .02 when I ink. That's it. I don't even switch 05. Everything is a .02. That way I don't have to switch pens.
No, you know what?
If you can draw, you can use whatever, right? So I use that, and it works fine. It looks good.
No, it's clearly doing the work you need it to do. You know, and
I have like ink now because I want to spot black on things more, and like that even feels a little like, ugh, what am I doing? But that's also why I love that screen tone. When I was doing that, was like, it looks cool, but it's just something that's physical. It's there.
Yeah.
Well,
joking aside about how much it costs, like screen tone is really like awesome. Like it's just such a cool. Again, going back that way, it's such a vibe when you're just putting it on, you're cutting it out, you're doing these, you're really just getting into the creation of it, and it's not the same if you're doing it digitally. It's just not. Doesn't mean it looks better or worse for the project you're doing. It's just, it's a different thing. And again, I just think a lot of this tool discussion is just people afraid to not do the things the way they know people are successful doing them. And, for me, I'm most successful when I have multiple ways I can accomplish my goal, because I'm never going to have I'm not going to have 8 hours straight to sit down on a table and ink a page, pencil and ink a page. That's just not going to happen for me. So right now, having something portable that I can take in the car or whatever, and just have on, I can have it on my lap while, my wife and I are watching a show or something, and just, make progress here and there and stuff like that. That's helpful for me. But for someone else, for you, you're like, you don't have kids, you don't have, that extra responsibility pulling you away. You have your responsibilities of, drawing your comics and all that. And you can sit down, you can have your way you want, the way you want it, and the way it works best for you. And I think, there's just too much emphasis on, because you can look at someone like Mike Norton, who's all digital, and he's been doing more physical commissions and stuff lately, and clearly, clearly it's not like because there's.
I try not to look at Mike Norton's art.
What's that?
No, I'm playing. I love Mike Norton.
Yeah, he's one of the best. And but there's people who rely a lot on the digital tools to do what they do, and then when they get to a physical drawing, it's not there in the same way. It's almost like a different artist is drawing it. And he's not one of those guys, but it's interesting for me to see that kind of like split. So even when I'm doing stuff these ways, I'm trying to approach it the same way I would if I was just doing it on a board. So like I even hesitate using certain effects and stuff they have in the Clip Studio and all that, because I'm like, well, I wouldn't know how to recreate that accurately on a board. So I don't know if I, even though like no one gives a shit, Don. It's one panel out of how many pages? Who's going to give a shit? But that's the neuroses that we all have, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I've gotten this far into the podcast. I have to ask you the 3 critical questions of the podcast.
What's up?
That is comics, coffee, and metal. What's doing it for you lately?
What are you talking about?
What are you vibing on all of those? And if
metal, I'm waiting for that new Deftones.
That new song is nice.
Ohms is great. I can't wait for more. But like I said, I don't really listen to much metal anymore, because it's just like I'm a little over it.
I think you would like this band called Loathe.
Okay.
Loathe.
Okay.
They're real heavy. There's some screaming and stuff, but they are, to me, a vibe. So to beat the dead horse of that word in the show.
It's just hard for me to listen to a lot of metal for some reason. Like, it's just, unless it's like nostalgia stuff that I like from when I was younger, Like most new stuff, I'm just like, oh, whatever. Yeah, but I hear you.
Yeah, it's not it's not so much just like metal, metal, metal. It's very much a slower, lower tuned, just kind of jammy type of thing.
Sure. So for comics, I don't know. I like all kinds of stuff. Usually whatever my boy WJ puts out, Daniel, it's fucking sick. I don't know. It's like it's weird because I mainly like what my friends do. Oh, but the new Adrian Tomine book came out, and that's amazing. Do you ever read any of his stuff?
No. He's definitely on my list of stuff I eventually have to check out. But
yeah, it's like Diary of a Long Distance Cartoonist or something. It's something like that. It's fucking sick. It's incredible. So I love that. And then I don't drink coffee. I drink tea.
That's fine.
I drink a lot of matcha. So I still fuck with matcha lemonade. That's my go-to. I'll put a little bit of lemonade, some matcha, mix that shit up. It's delicious.
It's all about what gets you going. Your rocket fuel.
Yeah. So that, and then mainly that's it.
Okay.
Seltzer water on deck always. Dude, I was so bummed. I went out last night to bring some seltzer water into my house. California's been a little bit of a heat wave. Yeah. We've had some wildfires and it's hot as shit outside. And I didn't drive anywhere yesterday or the day before, but I had forgotten to bring in a 12-pack of seltzer water that was in the back of my car. So I go out because I'm like, oh yeah, I should put that in the fridge, So I go out to my garage, to my car, I get it out, I bring it, I open my trunk and I just see like cans with the tops ripped off because they had like burst open in the back of my car, and I'm thinking like, fuck, there's got to be like a pool of water in here somewhere, right? Because like, because it was so fucking hot, it all like evaporated. And like I'm just thinking like, oh fuck, that can't be good.
What's your particular brand of seltzer?
I just get whatever's cheap, and I get lime. LaCroix I'll get when I go to cons just because that's a flex. I like to put up the con photo where I put like a mini fridge full of LaCroix. I feel like that's a hard move. But when I'm at home, I'll just get like Signature Select or before pandemic, I have a whatchamacallit, a Soda Stream that my mom had got me for my birthday. So you get a CO2 canister of that, and you can just refill that, and you're good for like a month and a half.
I've been trying to pull away from the soda, and I've been drinking a lot of the because it's been on sale a lot over here. The bubbly.
Yeah. Bubbly is cool. Bubbly
the lime is legit on that one.
Bubbly kind of came out after I had got into it already. Like it was new because they were trying to capitalize. And I did not like the energy they came into the marketplace with.
Well, they came in strong with the Michael Bublé commercials, and
I didn't like it. No, I didn't like what they were trying to say about me. I didn't like what
Yeah.
Because like here's the thing, I was early on like seltzer water, LaCroix, like when that became a thing. I was like there right before that.
Okay.
And so like I feel a very particular way about the way people will talk recklessly about seltzer water now. That it's so inundated in the culture.
You feel they're appropriating it from?
No, I just feel like people talk shit about seltzer water constantly when, like, it's refreshing.
No, it's when it's good, it's there, man.
People take easy shots at LaCroix.
Yeah,
they don't like it.
No, and it's again, it's about what you get too. Because I also tried this one that was like a watermelon strawberry. And it tasted like a year-old Sour Patch that was left in an ashtray. Yeah, so
I don't like a lot of those different flavors. Like I remember I went to
go straight with lime or cherry,
coconut one, and I'm just like, fuck out of here with this. No. But yeah, the lime ones I like, lemon ones I like, the orange ones are okay, not super into it. The citrusy ones, those are the ones I like.
I think the key is it's also got to be like ice cold too. Nothing. If it's ice cold,
that helps. Yeah.
That's.
What I'll do is I'll get lemonade matcha or limeade and matcha, mix that up. It's fucking delicious, right? Drink that till it's about halfway down, or I'll get that at Starbucks. That's my go-to like Starbucks thing. and drink that till it's like halfway down, and then I put in the seltzer water and I just stir that into it, and it's basically like a soda, you know. It's basically like seltzer water mixed with that shit. It's fucking delicious.
Nice.
Anyways,
Yeah. So now that we've answered those 3 questions, we can answer some more questions from Twitter.
okay, yeah, you got any?
Yeah, we got a few. So first is from Len at the Prophet Len.
Absolute trash. Go on.
Agreed. He wants to know how many times you've pushed the bad idea button.
A lot, because I love bad idea comics. I love the button. No, nothing but bad things to say about that. Horrible things to say about Len, the rat.
Our good friend Robbie Z at Robbie Z.
Oh, big time Robbie Z, yeah.
He shut him down because Len is the literal worst. Well, a funny thing about bad ideas, I've also pushed that button many, many times.
Yeah.
Back a couple weeks ago, the store I love and adore, Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago.
Love them. Yes.
They were in.
Did you see that I go ahead, finish your story.
They were in the running for some
Yeah.
event or whatever, you know, and during a timed thing, you had to press the button to support them.
Right. A little bit of a controversy about that.
Yeah, I would say so, considering the amount of pushes some stores got. But anyway,
some people are saying it's not a button cup; it was a button coup. You know that there was, you know, illegitimate button pushes. This is what I'm saying, because, you know, I rock with Challengers. I went there, I did a sign there, I met you there.
Yep, that's where.
And you know, so I challenge everything. I'm a challenger by nature, so I was riding with them, and they lost allegedly, and I am challenging that even. Yeah, I'm still saying we need to see the numbers, the real numbers. Show us the pushes, you know. So
so these, I think the second round they were in, it was timed when I was actually going to be, you know, running an errand to Target or whatever. So I'm like, oh, you know, what's cool? I'll just like walk around Target and just like mash the crap out of that fucking button while I'm just walking around. You know, I had my earphones in, so whatever. So, and I had them on low, so I would hear the ding, 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 ding. But for some reason, my Bluetooth wasn't connected fully or something, so it was also audibly coming out of my phone, and I did not realize that.
Horrible.
So I'm some fucking psycho walking around Target for like half an hour, going ding, 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 ding.
That rolls.
And I told Patrick from Challengers that I'm like, you know what, you know, it's fine. I don't mind looking like a psycho for you guys, you know, but.
Yeah, shout out to Challenger, shout out to Bad Idea. I love working for them. It's honestly great.
And I'm excited to see the book that you're doing with them, fantasy.
Yeah. That's why I pushed it so hard, man, because I'm like, fuck.
That's gonna be some hot
I want
shit.
people to know what I'm working on. I want to know what I'm working on.
They didn't let you know yet.
I had to push the button.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm doing a couple projects with them that are really cool. So the main thing is the Barbarian, the fantasy comic. There's barbarians in the pages that they showed, but you know, there are barbarians in the comic.
Which I must say, you doing something in that genre is not something I would have said, oh yeah, I want to see Ramon do that. But after I see that, I'm like, oh yes, I want to see that.
It's not something that I would have saw myself doing either. But at the time, I was in the middle of working on stuff, and DC had me doing a bunch of like shorts, and I like doing them because I got to draw all my favorite characters for the most part. Like not Kyle Rayner specifically, but Green Lantern, Flash, Batman and Robin, Superman.
That Flash story you did with Parker was just primo.
Thanks. So I got to do all the stuff I wanted to do, and that was great. But they presented the opportunity to do a long form thing, and I got a significant raise from my DC stuff. Like they're paying me very well. Like better than Marvel and DC ever did.
Deservedly.
Which is incredible. It feels great. And so he he asked if I wanted to do this thing, my editor, Warren Simons, and he had me in mind for it very specifically. And I was just like, why? I don't do fantasy stuff. But he just likes my eye for other things.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, look at this thing that you drew like this. I could see it. And so I was like, oh, fuck. I guess I do too. Like, you know? And so my approach to it is more in line with like bikers and like, well, I want it to be like very 70s influenced. And I mentioned that I grew up in like Northern California, but like the like I grew up in Tracy, California, which is like the town over from where the Altamont took place. I remember asking my grandpa, who worked at like a grocery store, like what it was like, and he was just like, "Oh, the hippies came and they took all the wine, and it was miserable." But you know, I was fascinated by it growing up because it was just like a very dark event in like rock music's history specifically. There's a bunch of sick bands that were there. Some played, some didn't. You know, like the Grateful Dead showed up, they saw what was going on. Like, we are not doing this. Fucking, let's get out of here. Santana did the same thing. He was like, nope, I'm out. So my approach to it is draw it for like a 70s audience, but like because there's so much fantasy stuff now because that stuff's very popular. Mm-hmm. But I don't do D&D. I don't do all that kind of shit. So my favorite reference for it is more like 60s bikers, 60s, you know, rock musicians. I want to make it feel like something came out in the 70s, but like me doing it, and it's very cool looking. I can't say anything more about it than just like my approach, obviously, but my approach is, I think, says a lot about like the fact that I'm doing that, you know, the fact that they're so open to hearing different ideas that I have for like how the cover looks, the colors, how the color is like, I'm working with Tamara again, like the ideas that I have for how she's going to color it. Like they are so down for everything that it's like extremely free creatively.
That sounds amazing. And, you know, letting you and Tamara like let loose on something.
It'll be the most control I've had on a project since Border Town. And it feels awesome. Like, you know, it feels good. So
that's awesome, man. I'm really excited to see what, you know, when that's going to come out. I guess people got to push the button. Is it badidea.com?
Yeah.
Go push that button so we can get some more peeks at Ramon's doing. He can figure out what exactly he's doing next. Our next question comes from John Westoff at Anti-Drummer on Twitter.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite comic with music as a main theme?
Aside from Murder Falcon?
Well, no.
Oh, Love and Rockets.
Okay.
Love and Rockets is like my favorite comic of all time, so
nice.
They play music in it. Have you ever read Wigwam Bam?
No.
So there's a story in Love and Rockets about these two girls, and it's like in the it's like the mid to late 70s, and they become like punkers through like liking like glam rock when they were kids. And there's that song Wigwam Bam by Sweet, and they like play it on a record, and they like fall in love with it and like the energy of it. And from that, like the two girls kind of like separate, but one becomes punk and the other one dies. But it's like it's so fucking good. So like Love and Rockets, Wigwam Bam, that story specifically, and also Bumperhead by Gilbert Hernandez. That was Jaime, Love and Rockets, but Bumperhead was another story that's like kind of similar about like a young kid who like becomes punk over the course of like this comic, and like through it kind of just like goes through all the like proto punk bands, like as some young person back then, which he would have. It's really great. So those two.
Okay, yeah, Love and Rockets is definitely a blind spot for me in terms of comics, which I intend to fix eventually. But
Bumperhead's great. That's not part of Love and Rockets. That's just like one single book that is like real accessible. And also, Love and Rockets. I always hear that people say it's inaccessible, and I get it on some level because it's so long, and that's what I always thought. But a lot of the new trades they put out, you don't really need a whole lot of the backstory. Like the new one that Jaime just put out called "This Is What You Think of Me" or something like that. or is this how you see me? It's about like these people that were in a punk band in the 80s. It's all the same characters. Like if you would have read it, you would know what they got up to, but they have a big reunion back at like the old place that they used to play punk shows at, and they're all like old and reminiscing about the old days, and like there's flashbacks to shit that happened back then. It's like really cool. But yeah, Love and Rockets, the Jaime stuff, Bumperhead.
Nice. And speaking of Love and Rockets love, that Dave Jordan wants to know, because he's a big Love and Rockets guy.
My guy Dave.
Yeah. He wants to know which K band, Korn or The Knot?
The Knot is Slipknot though.
Yeah. I don't know.
I guess Slipknot, just because those albums meant so much to me. It was like first two.
Are you a fan of the newer stuff lately, or?
Not really.
No?
Like I still like when All Hope Is Gone comes out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of it though is like I loved Paul Gray, that bassist.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away also.
Yeah.
I thought he was very underrated for what he brought to that, and like not having Joey Jordison also seems weird. But I'm just not super into it because I don't like a lot of the metal, but in general, I would say Slipknot more just because those first two albums like hit so hard for me. But I mean, I love Korn, so I don't know. Of those two, I would lean towards Slipknot just because of how personal that is.
Okay. No, I totally get that. I think if you look over the course of the careers, I think Slipknot probably has also the strongest consistency.
If I have to pick one album, I'm picking Slipknot debut album, Slipknot, and I guess after that might be Korn. But fuck, Iowa's so good. It might be like Slipknot, then Iowa, then like so you know what I mean. So
yeah, I couldn't stand Korn, to be honest, until one day I was in college and I was at a speech class, a public speaking class, because I'm so great at it now. And one of my classmates, he was a metal guy. So we were just kind of talking about like metal and all that, but he was like a metal guy. Like he was from Sweden, and he showed me pictures of this drum kit he has. It's like this 50-piece drum, that crazy ass drum kit. His bedroom was like lined with CDs. Like the walls were just like wall to wall CD covers. And he's like, oh yeah, I buy, all these metal CDs, and he burns them, and he has like 5 copies of each one. And he's like, oh, I should bring, because he's talking about all these like crazy ass extreme metal bands and all that. So then he's like, oh, I should bring you some CDs. And I'm like, yeah, cool, that'd be cool. He brings me 27 CDs. 27 CDs with full-on track listings on the burnt, the little paper that comes with the CD and all that. But one of them is a leaked version of Korn Untouchables, because there's a mix that leaked first, and then
I remember.
And
came out right before that album.
And I listened to that, and I was like, holy shit! Like, I think I like Korn now, because from I can tell I like a band a lot because when I'll have an introduction album, and then I can also go back to the earlier stuff and develop an appreciation for that. That's what happened with Metallica. I came into them with The Memory Remains, and I got I'm still hanging with Kill 'Em All, and I still like the new stuff. So with Korn, it kind of happened the same way. So if I were to answer Dave's question, I would say that I would say Korn, that mix of Untouchables, because the newer it doesn't hit in quite the same way.
Yeah, that album wasn't very good. I remember I went to Target and I bought that, and I bought Papa Roach, the second album that they came out with. Forget what it's called. It had the baby on it, but I didn't like either of them. Yeah. I remember I was so bummed. But 2 quick things. One, I know exactly how you feel, because that's how I was with Sepultura.
Okay.
But I love Sepultura. I think they're incredible. But I didn't know that I liked them until like eventually I put on like Roots Bloody Roots, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, this is insane. This is basically just Slipknot and Korn and all that shit that I like, except for like they did it earlier than that.
Yeah.
And then you could go back, and they were also doing like Korn, like Metallica type music too.
That was crazy.
Like their perfect band. Incredible.
Yeah.
Love Max Cavalera. I love when he shows up on Deftones to do Head Up.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you know that fucking Deftones rips too, is that they could do that shit also.
Have you listened to any Soulfly?
A little bit. I don't like Soulfly as much as when Max was in Sepultura, though.
The latest album, Ritual, that one was really. I mean, it's a heavy album, but it.
Oh, the new stuff is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I have listened to that a bit. Yeah.
So.
And the other thing was Metallica. I kept meaning to say this when we were talking, but I loved when I was younger, and I heard Seek and Destroy, and it was my shit. Like, I loved that song, but I didn't know what it was called. Mm-hmm. And this was like pre-internet, so you couldn't just be like, okay, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't just ask your phone and it would tell you. You had to like just figure it out. So I remember I went to fucking, it was my birthday. I was like 13, and I went with my grandmother shopping for a CD for my birthday, and I got and Justice for All.
Okay.
And I was like, well, every song on this fucking rules, but it is not. It's not Seek and Destroy. Yeah. And then I went, and then I borrowed from my friend Ride the Lightning. Mm-hmm. And it was, again, every single song on this fucking rules, but none of these songs are Seek and Destroy. And like when I was younger, the ones that I had were like Load and Reload. Yeah. So obviously I knew it wasn't on that. And Black Album, I knew it wasn't on that. And then I ended up figuring out what it was because I went to this thing, and I remember that where I heard it was because they played it for Sting. That's what Sting used to use in WCW. Okay. And they played it live for this motherfucker, and it was on like a WCW compilation, a live version of Seek and Destroy. And I was like, it's got to be it. That's got to be it. So I bought that, and it was, and I was like, this is it. This is the best Metallica song ever. And then when I realized like what album it was on, I just asked again, like not because I looked it up or anything, because I asked my uncle if he knew that song. Like, oh yeah, that's from like their first one. He had the cassette, and he just gave it to me. It was so sick. But that was like, I went through so much fucking work to find that song because I just loved it so much.
That's what you had to do, though. That's what you had to do.
You had to do that. That was the era where that was not like now. If you're looking for a song, like I said, you could do that. But even if you don't, just like ask your phone because you hear it on. It might take you, I don't know, an hour, like max. That took me months. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that took forever, and I just had that like like in my head. Like I couldn't, you know what I mean? It was so cool.
And even now, like you can just like Google like half wrong song lyrics, and it'll pop up.
Yeah. There's this dude who was at I was at a con here in Modesto, and he was like dressed like Slash, and he was kind of walking around like soloing with like a little amp on his belt, and like that's always kind of annoying. Mm-hmm. But I was like, hey man, can you play Motor Breath, my Metallica? And he just rips into Motor Breath, perfect. And I was like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened at a con.
A guy was doing it at C2E2, but he wasn't dressed up as anybody. He was just kind of like walking around playing like Creed riffs.
Like, really?
Yeah.
I have a pair of shoes that are like my favorite ones. They're Steve Caballero half cabs, Vans, and they were a Metallica edition that I got for like $70 on eBay. I was so fucking hyped, and they're Kill 'Em All. They're for Kill 'Em All. So like the bottom of them, it has like the album cover, like the hammer and the blood, but it's like really big so you can't see it, so it just looks kind of like weird shapes. But if you know, and it has like the logo in like the Metallica font, and it says one of the lyrics, I can't remember which one, on like the side of it, but those are like one of my favorite pairs, and I love it because it's Steve Caballero, who's like a Mexican dude, and I was just like, this is such a confluence of all the things that I love. It's like one thing.
It's would you dare say it's a vibe?
Absolutely.
All right, Ramon. Well, I think I've kept you long enough. Yep. We're approaching an hour 45 here. It's been awesome talking to you.
I can do these things for a long time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If you heard that voice,
I just can't hang this long. But also, you know, you have comics to draw. I have comics to draw, and eventually sleep because, you know, it's past midnight here and I am an old man. So again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. If there's anything you wanted to plug or just let everybody know where you're at online, where they can find you.
Yeah, at Ramon Villalobos on Twitter, the Ramon Villalobos on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but, you know, just press the button, badidea.com or whatever it is. But more importantly, just whenever that comes out, just read the book that is not announced yet.
And there you go. Ramon, thanks for coming on.